Here you go, sir. A king-size Ultra Krabby Supreme with the works, double batter fried, on a stick.
Thanks.
Barnacle head.
Pardon me?
You forgot your mayonnaise.
Thanks.
Look at them eating that garbage. It's disgusting.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week, at your behest, we're making a quadruple deluxe burger, double batter fried, with extra mayo and served on a stick. So first things first, we gotta make some special sauce. We're starting with equal parts mayo and ketchup, maybe like 1/3 of a cup of each, and then ideally we want to add relish, but I don't have any, so I'm gonna chop up a pickle very finely, a nice shake of paprika, a little shake of garlic powder, 1/4 of a small onion minced finely, and 1 to 2 tablespoons of yellow mustard. Give it a mix with a spoon if you don't want to get your tiny whisk all clogged up. Taste for seasoning with a single fingertip, cover and refrigerate until ready to use. Now we're onto the burger patties themselves, and whenever we're talking about fast food, to me that means smash burgers. So we're rolling all of our ground beef into 2-ounce little meatballs, seasoning with kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, and introducing them to a wicked hot cast iron skillet. Lube with vegetable oil and heat over medium-high until wisps of smoke arise off the surface of the cooktop. Insert meatballs into the situation and squash flat with a stiff cold metal spatula with leverage assistance from a rolling pin. Squash them flat, wait till they are deeply brown on one side, flip and cook for like 30 more seconds tops before topping with cheese, stacking high and removing from the heat. I know these burgers are a little small. I meant for this to be a practice round, but it came out so good I decided to roll with it. And these are deluxe burgers, which means lettuce, tomato, pickle, onion, and of course a generous smear of our special sauce. And based off its height alone, I'm guessing that it was a quad burger, so we're stacking 2 more patties on there atop a secondary bun, loading up with all the requisite toppings, and slathering our top bun with sauce. And there you have it, a serviceable fast food burger that's relatively healthy compared to the one that we're about to make. For our deep frying batter, we are combining 1/2 cup of cornstarch, 1/2 cup of all-purpose flour, a teaspoon of baking powder, a teaspoon of kosher salt, 3/4 of a cup of lager, and 1/4 cup of vodka in a large bowl, whisking gently to combine so as to not build up too much gluten in the batter. And I forgot this is a Krabby Supreme, so why don't we throw some bacon on there before we skewer the whole thing through with a bunch of skewers. Snip off the long ends, and then we are heating 2 quarts of peanut oil to 375 degrees Fahrenheit. While that heats up, it's time to batter our burger, words that I never thought that I would say. The batter should have about the consistency of paint, so feel free to add a little bit of beer if it's too thick, but that's assuming that you'd actually recreate this, which I really hope that you're not. Anyway, we're deep frying this guy for 4 to 6 minutes until it's evenly golden brown and crisp, removing to a wire rack set in a rimmed baking sheet and allowing to drip dry and cool off a little bit before removing the skewers painfully. And then it's time to double batter our burger, something I really never thought I'd say. Be careful, as the only thing holding this thing together is a thin layer of tempura, and then very carefully lower down into the preheated oil, frying again for 4 to 6 minutes until evenly golden brown and crisp. You know the drill. Use this time to contemplate what life decisions might have brought you to this point, and then we're taking it out and placing it once again on a wire rack set in a rimmed baking sheet, allowing to drip dry and cool off a bit before we prepare for consumption. This guy's normally served on a stick, and this is all I've got, so I don't know, there you go. But I don't know about you guys, I'm way more interested in the cross-section than I am eating this on a stick. We haven't had a good cross-section in a while, and this is a choice one. It's oddly beautiful in a way, but as usual, it all comes down to taste, and I'm really super embarrassed to say, this was really good. I mean, it's a deep-fried, double-battered quadruple cheeseburger. How bad could it be? But oh my god, I almost forgot the mayo. This is what makes the dish. Oh, sorry you had to see that. Nobody's allowed to make a meme of that. That's illegal.
Don't you get it, you crustaceous cheapskate? I can't make a double Krabby Patty with the work. I can't put a patty on a bun with lettuce, cheese, onions, tomatoes, ketchup, mustard, pickles, and top bun together in that order.
It's time.
It is time. As a thank you to everyone who helped make Binging with Babish my full-time job, it's time to finally make the all-time most requested dish on this show, the Krabby Patty. The ingredients of which are laid here before you, except, of course, the secret ingredient. What is the secret ingredient? Well, I just happen to have some right here. That's right, I've finally cracked the code. After a year of research, I've come to the conclusion that the secret ingredient is a heaping tablespoon of nothing. That might seem anticlimactic, but it actually makes a lot of sense. Mr. Krabs is a shrewd businessman, and it makes sense that rather than buying expensive secret ingredients, he would create a burger that is its own guerrilla marketing campaign. That being said, several sources cite the secret ingredient as being a pinch of King Neptune's Poseidon powder, which I think is monosodium glutamate, or MSG. So we're going to start by seasoning a store-bought frozen beef patty with salt, pepper, and MSG. Now some people are saying that it's a crab burger, but Mr. Krabs is a crab. That's pretty horrible and barbaric, even for Nickelodeon. So once thawed, we're going to prepare our burger much as we would any other burger. Vegetable oil, high heat, cast iron. Then we're going to follow SpongeBob's exact order of assembly, which starts with lettuce on top of the burger, which is a terrible idea. Never do this. I'm doing this for science. Then we're going single slice of yellow American, single slice of Vidalia onion, tomato, ketchup, mustard, and the absolute most important part, do not forget the pickles. You don't want Bubble Bass doing that god-awful laugh of his. Top bun, and there you have it, a Krabby Patty with the works. Even kind of looks like that one in the training video, right? Normal fast food burger protocol would be to just dig in, but I haven't been able to do a cross-section on this show in a while. That's a big relief for me. Now, as expected, this was a totally delicious burger. MSG makes things taste better, and while it's perfectly safe, I understand if people have reservations about eating it. Now, if you want to up the natural umami content of your burger, here's a few ways to do it. The first stop is to make a seasoning out of some natural umami bombs. We're going to start with a bit of bonito flake, which is a shaved dried fish, some dried shiitake mushrooms, some dried kombu, which is a sort of sea kelp, so this seems even more accurate. If I had to really realistically guess what Mr. Krabs' secret ingredient was, it'd be that, and a single anchovy. Now this is all sounding pretty fishy, sorry, but rest assured that these will not make your burger taste like seafood. We're going to grind these into a fine dust, and all we're going to get from them flavor-wise is their glutamate content. Use a spice grinder like this one to completely powderize these ingredients so they make an easy sprinkling dust for later on. Now onto the burger patty. Umami refers to the unctuousness and savoriness of a dish, so it only makes sense that we'd use some fatty, flavorful cuts of beef. So we're going to cut equal parts beef, short rib, and chuck steak into 1-inch cubes that we're going to place in the freezer for about 15 minutes along with the blade of a food processor to get everything nice and firm and cold. Pulse in your food processor until you achieve a nice pebbly ground beef. Make sure not to over-process your beef or you're going to end up with softballs instead of burgers. Back on umami duty, it's time to address tomatoes. We're going to oven dry our tomatoes in a low oven on a non-stick surface like a silpat, drizzle with a little bit of olive oil, sprinkle with a little bit of kosher salt, and place in a 200-degree Fahrenheit oven for about an hour and a half or until they come out wrinkly little prunes like these guys. Next, to up the glutamate content of our ketchup, we're going to make a puree of sun-dried tomatoes, add a little bit of olive oil if they're not smooth enough, and combine this with a bit of good old-fashioned ketchup. This is going to add a few additional megatons to our taste explosion. Each one of these steps is optional, but this one is especially optional if you'd like to additionally amp up your mustard, and if you like the taste of yellow miso, combine the two. Last but certainly not least is the issue of cheese. We're going to make Parmesan cheese crisps by baking grated Parmesan at 350 for about 15 minutes. Season and sear the patties as usual, and make sure you remove the burger from the heat before adding your spice powder, unless you want to set off every smoke alarm in your zip code. We're going to assemble our burger properly this time, starting with the patty, followed by some caramelized onions, one of our oven-dried tomatoes, a bit of our miso mustard, a bit of our sun-dried tomato ketchup. This stuff is awesome. A Parmesan cheese crisp, and last, where it belongs, a handful of iceberg lettuce. Top your burger and slice in half for that cross-section, and try to contain your embarrassment over the fact that you've overcooked the patty, but celebrate the fact that this burger is a symphony of flavor. You guys know me, I don't clean my plate unless it's really, really good, especially because these things are going straight to my thighs before I blow up.
I'll take a double triple bossy deluxe on a raft, 4x4 animal style, extra shingles with a shimmy and a squeeze, light axle grease, make it cry, burn it and let it swim.
We serve food here, sir.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I'd like to cordially welcome you to the new kitchen. There's lots to do and see here, but we'll get to that in due time because we need to make Bubble Bass's order from SpongeBob, and we will not forget the pickles. An ingenious Redditor with the username Boothin meticulously broke down the secret menu lingo and translated this into a 24-patty patty melt, for which we are going to prepare our mise en place. We're going to start by slicing a whole bunch of tomatoes and shredding a whole bunch of iceberg lettuce. We're going to remove the core from the bottom center of each half of our head of iceberg lettuce, and then we're going to cut it into thin shreds and then cut it across the shreds to make smaller burger-appropriate pieces of iceberg lettuce. And we're also going to finely chop a few white onions for the make it cry part of the order, which refers to extra onions. Now onto the subject of bread. He orders it on a raft, which means Texas toast. So we're going to cut thick slices of plain white sandwich bread, and we're going to toast them up on the all-new Binging with Babish 6-burner kitchen station. But we need a griddle, so hang on a second. I just happen to have a 38-inch griddle right here. And this is going to come in handy because we have a lot of things to fry up, and this makes me feel like a real fry cook. So I'm going to melt some butter and place our slices of Texas toast into the butter and fry until golden brown. We're not going to reapply butter because he orders it specifically with light axle grease, referring to not too much butter. We're going to set those aside because now it's time to deal with one of the most important parts of an animal-style burger, and that is caramelized onions. We need a whole lot of onions, 8 in total, sliced thinly and placed on our gigantic griddle, or if you don't have one of these, a large fry pan with a little bit of oil over medium-low heat, and we're going to cook these for a solid hour. I know that seems like a long time, but that's the amount of time that you need to truly break down the sugars and create a soft, jammy mixture of onions. Add a little spritz of water if they start to dry out too much, and just be patient, please. Your patience will be rewarded with the jammiest of jammy onions. Deep and rich in both color and complexity of flavor. Give them a little chop before you take them off the griddle and set them aside, because we need to make In-N-Out style spread, which is an equal mixture of ketchup and mayo with a sprinkle of garlic powder, onion powder, a conservative pinch of kosher salt, and an even more conservative sprinkle of paprika, along with a few tablespoons of pickle juice. Once that's all nice and homogeneous, it's time to start preparing to make smash burgers. I'm going to measure out a 2-ounce ball of meat, nailed it first try because I'm a pro like that, and then we're just going to sort of imitate the size and shape of that initial meatball until we have 24 identical, slightly larger than golf ball size meatballs, which we are going to throw down on a super hot griddle, if you can't tell by all the smoke, and using a large flat spatula, smash them down. They're going to cook for no more than 30 to 45 seconds before developing a beautiful brown crust, which we're immediately going to hide under a layer of American pasteurized cheese product. Then as soon as that gets nice and melty, it's time to head over to Station 3, the assembly station, where into a custom-made aluminum foil trough we are going to stack high 4 patties atop 2 slices of toast, followed by tomato, onion, shredded iceberg lettuce, and then top the opposing piece of Texas toast with a healthy spread of spread and some of our delicious jammy caramelized onions. Then, according to Bouthen's recipe, we stack 2 slices of Texas toast atop that mess and then start all over again, 6 times all told. So I'm doing 8 patties at a time, grilling them up and gently placing them into my giant burger trough, rinsing and repeating until I have created 6 layers of 4x4 burgers stacked on top of one another. This is very hard to keep upright. I don't know how Bouthen did it, but hats off to him. Eventually I managed to get the whole thing into a sort of burger, on which I am happy to say that I did not forget to stack a healthy sprinkling of pickles upon. What? Is that a sentence? I'm not entirely sure. I'm tired because I've been making this monstrosity for the past 6 hours or so. After some fruitless attempts to try and get this thing to sort of line up a little bit better, we decided to say f*** it, divide it into 6 equal burgers, and dig in. Now, while this was not the most structurally sound sandwich I've ever swallowed, it was a really acceptable patty melt, but its structure leaves it inherently flawed. I think we can do better. So why don't we refer to Bubble Bass's lesser-known second order as a guideline for a much more reasonable quadruple patty melt.
I will have a quad patty with a sprinkling of Himalayan salt, smoked paprika. I would like my patties with cheese, but not just any cheese will do. Have you any aged Haluda?
Fussy cheese name pronunciation aside, this has the makings of possibly a very good patty melt. So let's fry them up, stack them high, top it with the requisite thinly sliced tomato, shredded iceberg lettuce, thinly sliced onions, and of course, do not forget the pickles this time. Even though he didn't specify them, I'm going to keep the spread and caramelized onions because I think they're going to be really, really good, and why not? And mercifully, this results in a sandwich that can christen in the new kitchen with its first cross-section. Not half bad, a whole bunch of melty cheese and crispy, juicy beef, some flavorful toppings, and some unorthodox, but I would say on-point cheese and spice choices on the part of Bubble Bass. As you can see, the sandwich is not structurally sound, but it is tasty. All in all, this patty melt was a great way to ring in the new kitchen, with or without pickles.
I may be down, but I'm not out.
Way to go, buddy. It took us 3 days to make that potato salad. 3 days!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at potato salad. Moreover, how it could possibly take 3 days to make potato salad. Personally, I just think the guy was trying to make an unrepentant SpongeBob feel guilty, but it gave me an idea, and that was to pickle the potatoes. I had heard of a few restaurants pickling their potatoes before making French fries, and I figured that lacto-fermented funk could go really well in potato salad. So we're packing our potatoes into mason jars and topping them with a little cabbage bonus topper. This is just going to bring a little extra flavor to the party, and then we're going to weigh them down with some different fermentation weights, because any potatoes that float above the brine are subject to oxidation. Speaking of which, we are making a brine that is 2 1/2 tablespoons of kosher salt to 4 cups of water. We're going to stir that up real nice until everybody's dissolved, and then pour the brine over top of the potatoes. This is about as simple as pickling gets. Once we've got those filled up to the bottom lip of the jars, we're going to affix our lids. I've got these dope little airlock lids for fermentation, but bear in mind that you can do this entire process in a bowl with some plastic wrap if you want. Just make sure that everybody's submerged, use a glass bowl, but however you do it, we are letting these guys sit for 3 days straight. I obviously don't feel like waiting that long, so with a snap of my editor fingers, we got ourselves some lacto-fermented potatoes. Now, that stark white mush that we see in the bowl strikes me as the absolute standard potato salad. That is half a minced onion, 1 rib of minced celery, half a cup of mayo, 2 tablespoons of white wine vinegar, a pinch of sugar, a generous sprinkling, maybe 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, an inexplicable and roughly chopped hard-boiled egg, a little kosher salt and freshly ground pepper to taste, and you've got the basic dressing for basic potato salad. But we can't have the color or variety that comes from skin-on potatoes, so we need to go with some simply cubed russets that I similarly pickled for 3 days. I'm going to simply drain these and boil them for about 15 minutes or until completely tender, and then once cooled, add them to our potato salad dressing. You can obviously substitute regular boiled potatoes in this recipe if you want. We're going to give them a tender stir, a gentle dump into our serving bowl, and there you have it, the absolute standard American potato salad, aka a bowl of mayo with some potatoes in it. So naturally it tastes quite good. Do the pickled potatoes make much of a difference? Not really, because especially after only 3 days, the tang is pretty subtle, so it's getting drowned out by the mayonnaise. Why don't we try a bit more sophisticated potato salad courtesy of undisputed food god J. Kenji Lopez Alt. So after boiling our potatoes to toothsome completion, we are finally chopping half of 1 red onion, about 2 or 3 tablespoons of sour cream, a deluge of freshly chopped dill, or about 3 tablespoons worth, a tablespoon or 2 of white wine vinegar, a few pinches of kosher salt to taste, some freshly ground pepper. We're going light on the seasoning because we're going to have to add more down the line, some slimly sliced scallions, and I like a few finely chopped chives. Probably doesn't do anything, but I don't know, I had extra chives. I mean, look at all the chives I have. We're mixing all this together before forgetting that we almost forgot to add a tablespoon and a half of olive oil, along with 1 large fork handleful of whole grain mustard. We're then mixing that to combine and then adding our boiled and cooled potatoes. I feel like I'm saying the word potato a lot. Let's come up with another name for these things. How about Scoodle-doos? No, we'll just call them potatoes. Anyway, we're mixing our potatoes into the dressing and putting them in our serving bowl, and there you have it, the best potato salad in the observable universe. Let's give it a try and see if using pickled potatoes made a difference, and the answer is kinda. They've definitely got that fermentation funk, but it's getting lost underneath that flavorful dressing. I've only got one more potato salad trick up my sleeve, and that is to go full Guy Fieri and make a deep fried potato salad. That really resembles something more like patatas bravas, so we're just deep frying our potatoes for about 8 minutes, just enough time to make some old school mortar and pestle aioli. We're starting by crushing 2 large garlic cloves into a paste using the mortar and pestle. Then once you got yourself a nice smooth paste, we're going to add 2 egg yolks. This is going to add a distinct egg yolk-like quality to our aioli. Then using the pestle, I think that's what this part is called, we're just going to mix up the egg yolks with the garlic until they are well combined, and then while mixing rapidly, we're going to slowly drizzle in some neutral flavored oil like canola or vegetable until an emulsion forms. Then once your aioli has outgrown its mortar, I think that's what that part is called, we're taking the party back to my place being a larger bowl. Now we're going to bring some more flavorful oil to the party, that is some olive oil. Any second now, here it comes. 1, 2, 3, and there we go. You can switch off oils as necessary to your taste. I like a mixture of both, but either way we are whisking constantly while very, very slowly adding oil until a thick emulsion forms. Maybe about a half a cup of combined oils for every egg yolk. Then once we have a nice thick aioli, we need to taste it to make sure it's not too harsh, and then season to taste with kosher salt. By this time, your potatoes should be done frying, deeply golden brown on the outside and tender on the inside. We're draining those on paper towels before placing in a bowl, tossing with a little bit of kosher salt and smoked paprika, which is going to get us a little bit closer to patatas bravas. Start the music, make sure that everybody's dancing, and then pour out onto a serving plate. And then we're just going to top these simply with aioli and some scallions if we can get the aioli to come out of the friggin' bottle. Come on, here we go. Perfect drizzle in 3, 2, 1. Oh, okay. It's fine, my kitchen ceiling's been looking really boring lately. We're topping these guys with a smattering of scallions, and there you have it. Something that can almost very charitably be called potato salad. And it was at this moment that I remembered that Yukon potatoes do not respond well to deep frying. The flavors were good, but the texture was all off. It was gummy. So maybe it's time to take this recipe back to its inspiration, which is pickled French fries. There's a restaurant called Al's in San Francisco where they pickle their potatoes before making them into French fries. So I thought I would try just that with the fry, freeze, then refry method. If you want to see how to do that, click the link in the upper right hand corner right now, and then toss with a little bit of kosher salt while still warm, and let's see how they taste. And I've got to say, fermented French fries are an interesting snack. They're sour and funky and barely even need to be dipped in ketchup, and I'd really recommend that you make all the previous recipes with normal potatoes, unless you're trying to make a sponge feel bad.
And here's your triple gooberberry sunrise, sir.
Oh, triple gooberberry sunrise, huh? Well, I guess I could use one of those.
Now you're talking. Hey, waiter! We need another one over here.
There you go.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the hotly requested triple gooberberry sunrise from SpongeBob SquarePants. Now let's get down to the business of making sundaes. First up, we have to make a custard. I'm starting with 1 cup of whole milk, and SpongeBob and Patrick look like they were in kind of an old-timey soda shop, so I'm going to add 15 grams of non-diastatic malt powder, which I'm going to aggressively whisk using a full-size whisk because this stuff likes to clump. Once fully incorporated, I'm going to add 2 cups of heavy cream. Then, just like any ice cream base, this stuff needs a sweetener, but I wanted to try to add at least 1 undersea ingredient, so I'm going to add 15 grams of carrageenan, a red seaweed extract that's commonly used as a thickener and that's going to make for a smoother, more scoopable ice cream. This stuff also loves to clump, but if we tiny whisk it into our sugar, it's going to get dispersed more evenly and fully dissolve without putting up a fuss. Now the next step is to make sure that both everybody is dissolved and homogeneous, and also bring our mixture up to the barest of simmers. We just want little bubbles forming around the outside of the pot. Stir frequently to make sure that the milk doesn't scorch, kill the heat once you start seeing the little bubbles, and then it's time to start tempering our eggs. More accurately, 5 large egg yolks that we're going to place in a heat-proof bowl and swaddle with a moistened towel that will allow us to whisk one-handedly as we slowly ladle in the hot milk and cream mixture. At first you want to add this in a very, very, very slow stream, but by the 3rd or 4th ladle full, your eggs will be tempered and you can add it faster. All in all, we want to whisk about 1/3 of the hot stuff into the cold stuff before adding the cold stuff back into the hot stuff. Makes sense? Good, because now we're headed back to the stovetop, where over medium-low heat, we're going to bring this mixture up to 185 degrees Fahrenheit, whisking pretty constantly to make sure that nobody's scrambling on the bottom of the pot, and you'll know it's done both when it reaches 185 degrees Fahrenheit and when it reaches a state that the French referred to as nup, which roughly translates to thick enough to coat the back of a spoon and to leave a trail when a finger is dragged across its surface. Actually, I think it literally translates to tablecloth, but whatever. Next up, during their Sunday consumption, SpongeBob and Patrick appeared to be getting inebriated. So this being from a cartoon, we're going to incorporate a little bit of this brown liquid from this bottle marked XXX. One can only imagine what this brown liquid could possibly be, but let's just say that it's whiskey. So once killing the heat under our custard, we're going to add about 2 ounces of XXX mystery brown liquid, plus the sliced and scraped carcass of 1 vanilla bean. We're doing this while the custard is still hot so that the flavors can better steep. That being said, the faster we cool off our custard, the better. So we're placing a smaller bowl into a larger bowl filled with salted ice and water, and pouring the custard into the smaller bowl. Basically, the ice is going to cool things off, the salt is going to make the ice disperse its coldness faster, and the water is going to make sure that the coolness is evenly distributed. We're whisking occasionally for about 10 minutes until it reaches 72 degrees Fahrenheit, covering with plastic wrap and fridging for at least 4 hours or until fully chilled and ready to churn. Then we're churning via your churning method of choice, making sure to remember to remove that vanilla pod, trying desperately and failing to get our lid into place, come on, there we go, and churning for about 35 minutes or until we get a consistency similar to very firm soft serve. If you don't have an ice cream machine, go ahead and click the link in the upper right hand corner right now to see how to make ice cream by hand. However you churn it, it's now ready to head into the freezer. So we're going to scrape out as much of this delicious gunk as we possibly can into the freezer safe vessel of your choice. Optionally press some wax paper or plastic wrap directly down onto the surface to prevent freezer burn. Cover it up and freezer it for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight. Plenty of time to contend with the thing that I might be allergic to, so I'm wearing gloves. The festive bananas that that we're going to have visibly jutting out of all different points of the sundae. So we're peeling them, slicing them in half, and repeatedly skewering them with toothpicks. This would obviously make them hazardous to eat at the speed at which SpongeBob and Patrick were eating them, but I'm positive that there's no other way that they're going to stay in place. I'm also going to pop these in the freezer for about an hour to increase their rigidity. Then, finally, it's time to assemble our triple gooberberry sunrise. We got ourselves an old school looking blue glass ice cream bowl, into which we are going to deposit 3 very large scoops of ice cream. And I gotta say guys, this carrageenan stuff makes for very scoopable ice cream. This stuff spent over 12 hours in the freezer and it's still super soft. Now I'm just going to place it back into the freezer for 15 to 20 minutes to make sure that there is no extraneous meltage during assembly. First up, our little ice cream buddy appears to have a hot fudge hairdo. So I'm just going to place a generous dollop of cooled fudge on top of the top scoop, top that with the banana hat, and flank with our 2 banana arms. Then the face appeared to be made from green, blue, and red candies. So I've got green and blue M&Ms and 1 red peanut M&M, which we really gotta shove in there to make them stay in place, and then an inviting red licorice smile. Then I assume that the triple gooberberry refers to these 3 maraschino cherries delicately skewered on the end of each banana. And there you have it, the triple gooberberry, oh, hang on a second, fix the eye here, a fast disintegrating but mildly intoxicating ice cream sundae. Now to give it a try, I think the most upsetting thing to do would be to take a scoop out of this guy's face. Sorry, little friend. And I'll tell you right now, this is far and away the best homemade ice cream I've ever made. The texture is pretty much commercial quality. It has a nice boozy flavor, but it's not overwhelming thanks to the malt. But in this whole sundae, there's just about a half a shot of bourbon total. And SpongeBob and Pat ate like 10 of these each, so it kind of makes sense. But if you're trying to cut back on calories, you might just want to pour some XXX liquid directly on top. Ooh, that's somehow even more upsetting, kind of like the ending of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And as an ice cream topping, it's just kind of so-so. Anyway, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna run and grab my EpiPen because I think I'm allergic to bananas.
Our peanuts jar is totally empty. Wait, I know one other place we can find peanuts. Good thing I still have these peanut plants growing in the windowsill. A little texture never hurt. There we go. This sundae's gonna taste great!
I don't know, somehow I doubt that. Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish. For this week we're taking a look at SpongeBob's onion, ketchup, and peanut plant sundae. And yes, this is an actual peanut plant that I bought on Etsy. It's too young to have yet yielded any nuts, but I think ultimately that's not going to matter. So for the TV show accurate version, we are weeping as we thinly slice a large Vidalia onion, filling a bowl with our ice cream surrogate, aka a whole bottle of ketchup, scattering our Vidalia onions across the top and leaving plenty of room for our Tennessee red organic heirloom peanut plant. Roots, dirt, and all, as SpongeBob said, a little texture never hurt. Except that eating dirt is a very effective way to give yourself a parasite. I had to Google that, and I came across a lot of articles on the subject, because apparently there's a lot of people out there that like to eat dirt. I, however, am not one of them, so I'm going to carefully scoop around the dirt, grab some peanut greens, which are apparently perfectly edible, and here we go, let's try a bite of SpongeBob's improvised sundae, which I hopefully shouldn't have to tell you is not very good. It's ketchup, onions, and leaves. It's like eating a burger without the bun or the burger. And yes, it did give me rancid breath, so making an edible version of this is going to take some doing. I'm thinking the only way to do it is to make ice creams flavored after the different parts of the sundae. First up, the onions. I have 2 large Vidalia onions that I've halved and thinly sliced, which I'm now going to caramelize. I'm going to start by gently sauteing them over medium-low heat, adding a little kosher salt and freshly ground pepper, and then I'm going to cook them covered, stirring occasionally for about 15 minutes. We just want the onions to soften up, as well as give up a bit of their moisture, but we don't want anything turning brown just yet. Once about 15 minutes have passed and the onions are nice and soft, we're going to remove the cover, increase the heat to medium, and cook, stirring frequently, for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. Add a splash of water and scrape the bottom of the pan as many times as you like until you have some deeply golden brown jammy onions. This stuff is completely delicious and very naturally sweet, so I'm very curious to see what kind of ice cream it's going to make. The next thing I'm curious about, tomato-based ice cream, which is going to be our stand-in for ketchup. I'm going to start by making a tomato jam. I'm cutting little crosses into the bottoms of 1 kilogram of fresh, ripe tomatoes, which we're then going to blanch and peel. In other words, we're dropping the tomatoes 1 or 2 at a time into a pot of boiling water for about 1 minute, or until you start to see the skin split along the sides. We're then fishing them out and dumping them directly into an ice water bath. This is called shocking the tomatoes, and it's going to both halt the cooking process and make the tomatoes easier easier to peel, which, once everybody's blanched and shocked, we're going to start doing. We're going to gently peel the skins off each tomato, then cut the tomatoes into quarters, cut out their cores, and then cut each quarter into 1-inch pieces. Once your tomatoes are broken down, it's time to scoop them directly into your lap. This is going to make for an efficient, I'm just kidding, there's a saucepan down there. Into a medium saucepan goes our tomatoes, along with about 450 grams of granulated sugar and the juice of half a lemon. We're then going to bring this to a simmer over medium heat, reduce the heat to medium-low, and continue to simmer for about an hour, stirring frequently and occasionally skimming off the orange foam that appears on top. By the end, the mixture should have reduced by about half. Now, to represent the peanut plant, I want something earthy, something grassy, and something peanutty. So I'm going to make a beetroot, matcha, and peanut ice cream. Now, for all of our ice cream flavors, we're going to need a basic custard, same as the one we made for mochi ice cream last week. 4 cups of heavy cream, 2 cups of milk, 1 cup of sugar, and a pinch of kosher salt brought to a bare simmer over medium heat. Then we're bringing this mixture over to 8 separated egg yolks that we have set in a large heat-proof bowl. Then we're going to very, very slowly ladle the mixture into the eggs while whisking constantly. This is going to temper the eggs, which is going to prevent them from scrambling in our ice cream. And this ice cream is going to be weird enough without scrambled eggs in it. Once we've added about 1/3 of the heavy cream and milk mixture, we're adding everything back to the pot and whisking constantly over medium heat until it reaches 175 degrees Fahrenheit and becomes thick enough to coat the back of a spoon. Now into some various containers, I have our different flavorings. Tomato jam on the far left, followed by caramelized onion. Next, some beetroot puree, and last, some creamy peanut butter, about 1/2 cup of each. We are then tiny whisking each of these until they are completely homogeneous. And if you're wondering where the matcha ice cream is, I have some left over from last week that I'll be repurposing. Because, fun fact, you can melt and rechurn ice cream. Well, maybe that's just a fact, I don't know about a fun fact. Either way, every custard is getting covered and fridged overnight before being churned via your method of choice. There's our beetroot ice cream, some matcha ice cream, some peanut butter ice cream for a peanut flavor, caramelized onion ice cream, and tomato jam ice cream, each of which should be churned until it has the texture of soft serve, at which point we're going to scrape it back into a clean container, smooth it out, and let it camp out in the freezer again overnight. Then, about 1/2 hour before serving, we're going to transfer everybody over to the fridge so they can soften up a little bit for easy scooping. So here we go, 1 heaping scoop each of caramelized onion, tomato jam, and then to stand in for the peanut plant, you'll see that I did a kind of Neapolitan of beetroots, matcha, and peanut butter. Is it the prettiest thing in the world? No, but neither am I, and I'm okay with me. But is that all about to change as I dig into this insane mishmash of savory sweet ice creams? Let's find out. The caramelized onion was interesting, the tomato jam was interesting, and the beetroot matcha peanut butter was interesting. That's about the only thing I can say. They are inoffensive, but I wouldn't go so far as to call them good. I think what this thing needs is a little bit of the old-fashioned sundae treatment. Whipped cream, chocolate sauce, and a cherry. Now that is a sundae. Let's take a big old bite and, that is when I learned that chocolate and onions don't mix.
Mini patties, available in 6 designer colors.
Mr. Squidward, come look. Don't that look appetizing?
Good, sir.
Wait! Give me an orange patty with extra purple!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're finally taking a look at pretty patties. Now, the late great Stephen Hillenburg, creator of SpongeBob, specified that Krabby Patties are meatless. So as you can see, I have the entire vegetable kingdom strewn before me. But before we can make any pastel patties, we have to make some brilliant buns. Now, my first instinct was to recreate the brightly colored, barely browning bread from the Brood Witch episode. Now, not only did the egg wash used to adhere the sesame seeds to the bun cause the bun to brown, but late that night I awoke in a cold sweat, remembering that eggs are not vegan. And on the off chance that's what he meant, I decided to start over with a lean burger bun dough. We're starting with 510 grams of bread flour in a large bowl, to which we're going to add 10 grams of instant yeast, 30 grams of sugar, and 2 teaspoons of kosher salt that we're going to regular size whisk together to make sure that everything is evenly distributed throughout the flour, before adding 275 ml of water and 60 ml of neutral flavored oil like vegetable or canola, mixing together at first by spatula and then by hand until combined into a shaggy yet homogeneous dough. Normally we would now want to knead this within an inch of its life until it passes the window pane test, but since we have to make 6 different colors and I don't want to make 6 different batches of dough, I am weighing and dividing this dough into 6 equal pieces, working with one at a time and keeping the rest covered. First I'm going to break it in half, place it in the jar of a food processor, ready the food coloring of my choice, and then with the food processor running, slowly drizzling a small amount of color down through the feed tube, then letting the dough process for about 45 seconds total. little, both evenly distributing the color throughout the dough and helping to develop gluten. Use the dough as a sort of sponge to pick up all the scraps, give it a sort of gestural kneading, and place it in a covered oiled bowl until nearly doubled in size. Then we're going to rinse and repeat with the remaining doughs, orange, red, indigo violet, and good old-fashioned green. Once everybody is well kneaded and tinted, it's time to let them rise. Cover everybody with plastic wrap and allow to bulk ferment at room temperature for 1 to 2 hours until visibly embiggened by anywhere from 50 to 100%. Next up, shaping. Go ahead and dig out the first color of your choice. I'm going with orange. Weigh it and divide that number precisely in half because each of these mini batches is going to yield 2 extra large slider buns, which I realize is an oxymoron. Go ahead and roll each portion into a nice, smooth, taut ball, lightly pressing down each to make sure that they don't end up too vertical, and arranging with plenty of space on a parchment-lined baking sheet before covering with oiled plastic wrap. Once again, leaving it to its own devices for 1 to 2 hours until nearly doubled in size. Then comes the sticky issue of sesame seed adhesion. I'm going with a water wash to keep things vegan and to prevent browning, but that's going to have all the sticking power of, well, water. So they're probably going to have all the staying power of my hairline. Either way, these guys are headed into a preheated 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 15 to 18 minutes until nicely puffed and set and registering between 195 to 205 degrees Fahrenheit at their thickest point. Allow to cool completely on the trays if they're on the lower end of that spectrum. Now onto the issue of vegan cheese-style products. Once again, I'm only making one of each of these burgers, so I don't want to make a huge amount of each different color of cheese. So I'm lining these muffin tins with oiled plastic wrap and using them as a mold for each color. For the cheese itself, into the bowl of a blender goes 200 grams of rinsed cashews, 200 grams of refined coconut oil, 2 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of kappa carrageenan, 25 grams of arrowroot powder, 2 teaspoons of kosher salt, 1.5 teaspoons of onion powder, 1 teaspoon garlic powder, 25 grams of nutritional yeast, 15 ml of lemon juice, 100 ml of sauerkraut or pickle brine, and 375 ml of cold water. This stuff's all getting blended together into rather a thick, pasty paste, for which you're probably going to need to enlist the help of your favorite blender stuffer, pureeing for at least 60 seconds on high speed with varying levels of difficulty until completely smooth. Next up, you're going to gently heat this on the stovetop until it reaches 180 degrees Fahrenheit. I can't seem to find footage of this, maybe I didn't hit record, but here's the stuff after it's been cooked, which I'm now distributing into each muffin cavity, where I'm going to proceed to tint it using a little bit of food coloring and a tiny whisk. This should hopefully yield 6 pucks of sliceable, meltable, colorful vegan cheese. All it needs is to be covered and refrigerated at least 4 hours or up to overnight to set up, the kappa carrageenan hopefully giving it a bouncy cheese-like texture. Now, upon extraction, I discovered that the tiny whisk betrayed me and the cheese color was not as consistent as I had hoped, but it was delightfully sliceable, kept its shape, and was actually very cheesy. It definitely tasted funkier and cheesier than American cheese does, even though that's obviously not saying much. If you're going to make this yourself with food coloring for some reason, maybe just add the food coloring before putting it in the mold. Now onto the patty part of the pretty patty. Obviously there's a wealth of colors in nature that we can put to good use, but how do we turn them into veggie patties? So as you can see, for that I am preparing a litany of legumes, cooking these 3 different colors of lentils to their various states of doneness, draining a whole bunch of different colored beans, and peeling some purple potatoes. Normally I would just cover these with cold water and cook them like it was any other day, but we want to make these things as purple as possible. So we're going to cover them with cold water and cook them like it's any other day. But during their last 3 minutes of cooking, I'm going to add some thinly sliced purple cabbage, making sure that it's fully submerged before adding a teaspoon of baking powder, which uses science or magic or both to turn the cabbage and the cooking water a brilliant shade of blue. Definitely not totally necessary, but I wanted to try it out, and this seemed as applicable an application as I could apply it to. Go ahead and spread this out on a rim baking sheet so that it can cool entirely before being fashioned into a burger. Also, corn. Just corn. Now it's finally time to start prettying patties. The patty equation we decided to work with was 1 part cooked vegetable, in this case spinach, 1 part legumes, I'm using half green lentils, half edamame, half a part the grain of your choice, I'm using brown rice, 1/4 part breadcrumbs or ground oats for a binder, 1 tablespoon vital wheat gluten, and salt and pepper to taste. Pulse until a ground beef-like consistency is achieved, thickening with more rice, ground oats, or vital wheat gluten as needed. And there you have it, our green patty. Don't have super high hopes for this one, let's try yellow. I'm starting with yellow lentils, the aforementioned corn, ground oats, and brown rice. More excited about this one because it's basically just a fried corn cake. Then for orange, I'm going grated carrot for the vegetable, brown rice for the grain, and vital wheat gluten for the binder. Medium hopes for this one. I love carrots, but I've never described them as burger-like. Next up for red, I'm going kidney beans for the legume. What I know are going to be divisive sun-dried tomatoes for the vegetable, brown rice for the grain, and ground oats for the binder. Pulse until pebbly, and let's be honest, not red enough. So this is going to be the one patty where I cheat with a little bit of food coloring. So let's all just collectively pretend that we didn't see that. And then for purple, as you might have guessed, I'm going with peeled and grated beets. This, along with some neutrally colored pinto beans, produced a picture-perfect purple patty. Next up, our blue potatoes and cabbage are going to be accompanied by blue corn tortilla chips, brown rice, and vital wheat gluten for a patty that I'm pretty sure is going to taste awesome. I mean, it's mostly potatoes and chips. So there you have it, 6 different veggie burger bases, each of which I'm going to press into 2-ounce patties the same width as our buns. The last bit of prep that now remains is the slicing of the vegan cheese. And given that this stuff has the consistency of Play-Doh, it might be more about shaping than slicing. Once you got your cheese, arts, and crafts ready to go, we can start slicing our buns. I wanted to make consistent, even cuts. And as it turned out, a coaster from today's sponsor was the perfect pedestal upon which to prop our bun. And of course, being French for bread. First things first, once our buns are sliced, we gotta toast them. I don't care what your burger's made of, I don't care what you're made of, you deserve a toasted bun. Once everybody is varying degrees of visibly golden brown, we're gonna make sure that our pan is nice and hot and well oiled, considering that our patties have little to no fat of their own. As you can see, each patty browns at a different rate, so be sure to keep a close eye on crusts, especially if you're making 6 different kinds of veggie burgers at a time. Also use caution when flipping with all that excess oil in the pan. Once everybody's fried up, it's time to color coordinate and serve. Each patty, bun, and cheese getting carefully color matched before being placed on a large balsa wood artist palette in the same color, order, and orientation as presented by SpongeBob on the show. And there you have it, folks, pretty patties. Lots of stuff to unpack here, so let's go one at a time. I'm scared of losing even more sesame seeds, but we must take a look at these cross sections. First up, the green pretty patty. And while this particular veggie burger was decidedly veggie oriented in its flavors, it had a nice little crisp to it and played really well with the vegan cheese. Next up, the orange patty. Look at that cheese sorta kinda melt. And this one was good. It didn't really taste like carrots, but not much like anything else either. Next up, the purple, violet, or mauve patty, which mostly just tasted like beets, which means I'm not going to eat it unless there's goat cheese. Next up, the yellow corn patty, which to my disappointment only barely tasted like corn. Next up, the indigo, or midnight blue patty. This one I'm most excited about, and it's pretty good, but it really does just taste like a tortilla chip burger. Last up, the red patty, made from sun-dried tomatoes and beans. Now this one at least kind of looks like cartoon meat, but it doesn't taste as much like sun-dried tomatoes as I had hoped. So let's rank them. First up, purple beets, not so great. Next up, yellow corn, about as bland a burger as ever there was. Almost the same story for the orange carrot burger. Then the red sun-dried tomato burger, a little bit more flavor, but still kind of disappointing. Then the blue burger, which was good, but maybe a little morally questionable. And then, believe it or not, I think the green was my favorite. It's a veggie burger that's not pretending to be anything other than just that, a veggie burger. But I think we can agree there's one thing that all these patties have in common. They are indeed pretty.
What's that? Candy machine. Kelp nougat crunch. I'll only be gone a second.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at the Kelp Nougat Crunch from SpongeBob, a candy bar I've been dreaming about since childhood that contains only 3 known ingredients: kelp, nougat, and crunch. Here before me, I have some sheets of toasted nori. I don't know if this is technically kelp or not, but it's going to bring some great oceanic flavors to our candy bar. Not something I ever thought I would actively seek out, but here we are. Now for the crunch, I'm going to make a layer of good old-fashioned Rice Krispie treat. I'm starting by generously lubricating a quarter sheet with nonstick spray and lining it with parchment paper. Molten Rice Krispie treat is about the stickiest substance known to man, so the more nonstick precautions taken, the better. Over on the stovetop in a high-walled sauté pan, we're going to melt and cook 20 grams of unsalted butter for 4 to 5 minutes over medium heat until it begins to lightly brown. That's right, we're making brown butter Rice Krispie treats. Next up, we're adding 100 grams of miniature marshmallows, stirring and cooking those for about a minute until they're fully melted. Add 50 grams of puffed rice bran cereal, stir until homogeneously gooey, kill the heat, add a little bit of salt, make sure that everybody has gotten to know everybody, and then dump it out into your prepared pan. Then you got about 2 minutes before the sky starts to harden, so while everything's warm and malleable, try to get everything as flat as possible. Like I always say, an uneven candy bar is made by an uneven mind. Now we're going to let this cool completely while we make an even stickier substance, homemade nougat. In a small bowl, I'm combining 35 grams of malted milk powder, 40 grams of powdered sugar, and 9 grams of sifted wakame powder. This is our actual kelp that's going in the candy bar. Go ahead and tiny whisk that together until no clumps remain. Let's give this a little taste out of curiosity, and it's good. It's weird, but it's good. Just like yours truly. Now, nougat is basically a hot sugar sugar meringue. So don your safety glasses and in the bowl of a stand mixer combine 2 large egg whites with 50 grams of glucose syrup. Meanwhile, over on the stovetop, we're combining 475 grams of granulated sugar, 550 more grams of glucose syrup, and 150 grams of water. We're going to bring this to a simmer and continue cooking over medium-low heat until it reaches 250 degrees Fahrenheit, by which time we'll hopefully have completed our unfinished business over in the stand mixer, which is to whip the egg whites and glucose syrup to stiff peaks before slowly and carefully drizzling in the boiling sugar mixture. Trying not to hit the sides of the bowl, but trying not to hit the wire whisk either. Then, once all the sugar's been added, we're letting this guy whip on high speed for 8 full minutes, during which time it should become smooth and glossy. At this point, we're going to add a teaspoon and a half of vanilla paste, and working quickly so that the nougat does not drop below 140 degrees Fahrenheit, fold in our kelp and malted milk powder mixture. And there you have it, folks, kelp nougat. I don't recommend tasting this until it's cooled completely if you at all value your mouth skin, but I'm happy to report that this has graduated from pretty good to surprisingly good. So we're going to scoop it out onto our awaiting Rice Krispie treat, and once again try to press and spread it out into an even layer while it's still warm. You're going to want to keep whatever tool you're using lubed up with nonstick spray, preferably sprayed at you by a friend, but eventually you're going to give up on that when you realize you could just use another sheet pan to press it out flat and even. Just make sure that it's appropriately oiled, press it down with all of your upper body strength, and pull it off to reveal that it didn't really make a difference, and if anything made things slightly worse. So just press it out as evenly as you can and remind yourself that it's not your job to change people's perception of how well you make candy. Oh yeah, we're also going to put down a couple of those sheets of naughty, likewise while this guy's nice and warm, otherwise it will not stick. Now once cooled, sometimes nougat can turn out a little brittle, so we got to slice it into clean, even bars while it's still a little warm. Go ahead and turn it out onto a lightly oiled countertop. Admire the effectiveness of your non-stick precautions. Now I'm going to start by trimming off the edges, not only to make snacks, but so our bars have clean, even, edges. Then we want to cut this down into individual bars. Now the bars on the show looked like a short, stout rectangle, so I'm going to make these a little inappropriately large, and despite having a ruler right there, I'm not going to use it and end up with uneven bars. Might as well eat my mistakes, right? But as it turns out, too soon. The nougat hasn't set yet. It needs to sit overnight before its final texture is achieved. Before that happens, I'm going to enrobe these in white chocolate. I did not temper this chocolate properly, so I'm just hoping that it's going to set at room temperature, and about halfway through the process, I had the bright idea to make these guys green, on account of them being kelp candy bars and what have you. So once the chocolate has miraculously set, we are left with the final product, the kelp nougat crunch. Let's take a look at that cross-section. Beautiful, looks like a candy bar, but how's it taste? And I'm happy to report it actually tastes really good. I'm sorry, you probably didn't understand that. It tastes really good.
Could we interest you in some chocolate?
Chocolate? Did you say chocolate?
Yes, sir. With or without nuts.
Chocolate? Chocolate! 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 Chocolate!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where last week we hit 10 million subscribers. So on Monday, we tried to come up with the craziest way we could imagine to celebrate, and I knew immediately we had to take a crack at chocolate from SpongeBob. And, oh, how do you like that? There's some chocolate right here. Never mind, easiest episode ever. Anyway, thank you guys for subscribing, and I hope you have a great day, and obviously I'm just joking. Of course, we are going to make some chocolate entirely from scratch, which is going to require some tools and ingredients that you can't really get at your local grocery. So if you guys will follow me on a quick field trip, we'll run out and get the stuff that we need to make our own chocolate, which might take us a bit farther afield than usual.
Chocolate? Chocolate! Chocolate!
Alright, that was dramatic, but we dragged the fancy camera all the way here, and by God, we're going to use it. We've got one day in Ecuador and we're spending it here at Hacienda Cacao Mango, a cacao farm nestled in the mountains about an hour away from the city of Guayaquil. Our guide Jamil, who's also an owner, provided us with a tour of the farm and showed me how cacao is grown and harvested there. The cacao fruit grows from these little flowers on the trees, and the 0.01% of them that get pollinated grow to this size in about 4 months. The ripeness of the fruit is judged by its color, which Jamil explained and then let me try harvesting one for myself.
As you can see, there is just purple cacaos, but we need to find red cacao right now.
Red.
So when the cacao is ripe, it's ready for collect or harvest. So if you see a red cacao, please tell me, because it's a nice. Yeah? Great. Now say, you can do it. Huh? Do it and twist in one direction, okay?
Oh, he's a twisty one. He's a twisty one.
Oh, great.
All right.
Hit the pot in this part. Just not too hard, not too light. Just, okay. Just 1, 2, 3. Yeah, ready? Yep, it's done. Yeah, great. There we go. Pull it.
Oh man.
Fresh cacao. The fresh cacao, the idea to try is just put in your mouth.
Don't bite it, huh? Don't bite it. Just put it on your mouth.
Suck it and don't bite.
When you finish, spit it out.
Oh, it's delicious.
Look, it's awesome. Yeah.
Oh man, it's delicious. Here, you gotta try this.
Very tasty. Very
Open wide. Once I got my fill of fresh cacao fruit, it was time to check out the next stage in the chocolate making process, fermentation, which we skipped over because Jamil didn't have any fermenting at the time.
Just get some stock footage.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna go see the fermenters. After 6 to 10 days, the beans turn a reddish brown and then are dried, after which they're ready to be turned into chocolate. This is what I'll be using to make modern chocolate at home, but Jamil wanted to show me the traditional way that chocolate was prepared. The fermented beans are roasted in a clay pot for a few minutes until you hear popcorn sounds, which is the sound of the husks cracking, indicating that they're ready to peel.
So the idea in the roasting process is try to peel the shell.
With the peels removed, we then run the beans through a manual grinder and shake the ground beans lovingly. Then we're back on the stove where we warm some water, to which we're going to add our 100% cacao, raw sugar cane, some chili pepper, lemongrass, and clove leaf. Once everything is brought to a simmer, it's ready to enjoy. Ah, perfect.
Arriba, abajo, centro.
But now it's time to head back to New York and make our bar of chocolate. So we thanked our gracious hosts and were on our way with fresh cacao fruit in tow, only to leave it at the hotel after realizing we wouldn't make it through customs. So I'm going to use these backup beans that I bought online. They might not be exactly the same, but for all intents and purposes, they're right where we left off at the farm. So we're going to start by roasting these guys, spreading them out evenly in a single layer on 2 rim baking sheets, roasting in a 250 Fahrenheit oven for 25 to 45 minutes, shaking and rotating halfway through. Shorter roasting times will apparently yield a fruitier chocolate, and longer roasting times yielding a nuttier chocolate. So we went for about 30 minutes to strike a good balance between fruity and nutty. Let these guys cool completely, and then it's time to peel, in a process known as winnowing. Now, not all cacao beans are as easy to peel as the ones we saw out in Ecuador. The shells were holding on for dear life, and the beans were a little bit more brittle, so before I could get the skins off, they were breaking down into nibs, which I then had to separate by hand, so eventually I turned, as I so often do, to a hammer, resigning myself to hand sorting through a kilo of nibs and shells, which I was determined to do for about 5 minutes. Luckily, we came across a technique that involves making wind in the kitchen, starting off by thoroughly smashing up a handful of beans, making sure that no shells were sticking to their nib counterparts, and then slowly, carefully sprinkling them down in front of a running fan. Thanks to the husk's lighter weight and less aerodynamic form factor, should get pushed out of the nib stream as they cascade down into a bowl. Now, this is obviously not a perfect system. It makes a dusty, husky mess of anything that's in front of the fan, and definitely does not catch all the skins, requiring at least a dozen passes to get rid of what looked like about 90% of the husks. The cool part is that it was surprisingly effective at not sacrificing nibs, as the pile accumulating to the left of the fan contained virtually only husks. That being said, some manual removal was definitely necessary, which Kendall and Nico were very kind to help me with. Otherwise, it would have taken me much longer than an hour and a half to sort through this kilo of nibs. But there you have it, the building blocks of chocolate, which must now be crushed into a liquid called chocolate liquor. No, not chocolate liqueur, which is alcoholic, while chocolate liquor is an ultra-smooth paste of cocoa solids and cocoa butter. Before we break out the heavy stuff, we're going to preemptively process the nibs in batches for about 1 minute each, until they're just starting to release their fats and take on a consistency like wet sand. Rinse and repeat with the remaining nibs, and then it's time to bust out the concher. This home appliance version of the traditional process, where 2 rough stone wheels are kept immobile in the center of a rotating drum, the bottom of which is made from the same stone. This has the effect of both grinding and warming the chocolate, deepening the flavors and making it impossibly smooth. We're going to start by gently warming the drum of the concher itself, using a torch on a very low setting and a laser thermometer. Then we're going to add the pre-ground nibs and set this thing to maximum grind, which is its only setting, just like me. Oh, wait, no, that didn't work. Both the joke and the concher, which, due to the still rough texture of the chocolate, obstinately refused to turn, just like me. That worked even less. Now you're supposed to let this grind for an hour on its own before adding any cocoa butter, but we decided to cheat, hoping that the fat would help get things going, and it did. Adding the chocolate and cocoa butter in small batches, the concher finally whirred to life. Now for a 65% dark chocolate, that meant obviously 65% cacao at 750 grams, 5% cocoa butter, 55 grams, and the rest is sugar, which we'll add after these guys get to know each other for about 4 hours. Now I can't recommend what I'm doing for safety and legal reasons, but we're taping down the 45-minute maximum timer on this concher and leaving this device to its own devices for 4 hours before adding any sugar. Now, I had never used one of these things before, so I was surprised to find that after the allotted time, it had rendered our cocoa solids and fats into an incredibly smooth liquid. It already looked and tasted like 100% baking chocolate, but we want to eat this stuff, so we gotta add sugar. 30% of the total weight is about 350 grams of superfine sugar, added slowly through the sugar feed hole thing. Now the chocolate's texture might have seemed very nearly done, but this thing was only getting started, gearing up to grind for another 20 hours. Apparently this not only makes the chocolate super smooth, but develops its flavor. The next morning, and it's not quite done yet, but I wanted to come downstairs and give it a taste. And at this point, it is untempered chocolate, which is kind of magic to see happen from its original bean state. But how's it taste? And the answer is, and I might be biased here, really, really good. It's rich and deep and not too sweet and pronouncedly fruity. Later on, I'm all dressed for work, and the chocolate has passed the 20-hour mark, and at this point it's clocking about 110 degrees Fahrenheit, a perfect place to start the tempering process. Now we want to slowly cool it off 2 ways, first by pouring it into a large stainless steel bowl where we can agitate and aerate it with great vigor. And this might seem like cheating, but we need some seed chocolate, that is, a handful of chocolate that's already been tempered so that it contains the precious crystals necessary to make our chocolate set, shiny, and snappy at room temperature. So after adding 10 to 20% of the chocolate's weight in seed chocolate, we're stirring the chocolate constantly and spiritedly, especially once the chocolate starts dropping below 94 degrees Fahrenheit, as this is where crystals begin to grow. If your seed chocolate isn't fully melted, you can place it over a pot of simmering water, but just make sure not to let it exceed 94. This is a pretty long and arduous process, so it's a good idea every once in a while to do a tempered test. Coat it in the end of a butter knife or tiny offset spatula with a thin layer of chocolate every 5 minutes, letting it sit at room temperature for another 5 minutes to see how your crystals are developing. You can see the improvement in the temper from left to right that resulted from nothing more than time and agitation. At long last, once the chocolate is tempered, it's finally time to turn it into chocolate bars. Spreading the chocolate evenly over a polycarbonate chocolate bar mold, scraping off the excess back into the bowl to flatten out the top. Don't worry, we obviously saved all the extra. And I plan on eating all of it over the next 7 days at most. And then to coax out any hidden bubbles underneath the surface of the chocolate, we're going to whack it many, many times as hard as we can without breaking the mold against the tabletop, before stepping aside and letting the crystals do their thing for at least 2 hours. And optionally, this is a point where you can add stuff like salt. After all, nowadays you can buy almost any dessert with extra salt sprinkled on it. 4 hours later, just to be safe, I'm finally going to unmold my bars. It looks like our temper was effective and the chocolate bars have set, so time to turn them out onto a sheet pan and take a look. And unfortunately, it looks like a little bit of moisture got into the mold before we poured in the chocolate, resulting in a slight bloom on its surface. But this is easily remedied by very carefully painting the chocolate with a torch. If you heat it above 94 degrees, it will go out of temper, so be very super careful. And there you have it, chocolate from scratch. It might not be totally bean to bar, but it's as close as we could legally get. All that's left now is some arts and crafts to make it look like the bars from SpongeBob. I'm starting with gold foil wrapped around the chocolate itself, blue foil around that, red foil stripe on top of that, yada yada yada. I got to play with a glue stick for the first time in a while. And while it might only be a cartoonish approximation of a cartoon, there you have it. Chocolate from SpongeBob. Look, it even matches the reference photo on Kendall's laptop. Now I just gotta make the same face. There it is. And as we all know, no self-respecting candy bar salesman would be caught dead without one of these. What is it? It's a candy bar bag, you knucklehead. So when you're carrying your candy bars from... oh, wait a second, hold on. I forgot about the candy bar bag. In here, we should have There we go. There's the good stuff. Thank you guys so much for helping the BCU reach 10 million subscribers.
You know, it's not as easy as it looks. Sometimes I gotta move the antenna, sometimes I lose the remote, and sometimes my butt itches real bad.
Oh, you poor thing. By the way, you forgot your briefcase.
Oh, so this is the thanks I get for working overtime.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week we're taking a look at Patrick's dessert briefcase from SpongeBob SquarePants, for which, as you can see, I've procured a very inexpensive briefcase, which I'm going to mod out using hot glue and leather straps to accommodate our overtime lunch, for which we're going to need a whole lot of donuts. And since we want lots of variety, I think cake donuts are our best bet. For a basic vanilla donut, we're starting off by combining 240 grams of all-purpose flour with 200 grams of granulated sugar, 100 grams of brown sugar, a teaspoon and a half baking powder, and a half teaspoon baking soda. Whisk together the dry and so too the wet. 180 ml of whole milk, 75 of vegetable oil, 1 tablespoon of vanilla paste, and 2 large eggs. Cracked and broken in there however you like. As long as you don't get any shell in there, it's no big deal. It's not like you're hosting a cooking show. Whisk the wet stuff until homogeneous and then add to the dry stuff, standard cake batter procedure. Gently fold together until no dry clumps remain and mostly homogeneous, not completely smooth, but pretty much there. This batter's going to thicken as we allow the flour to hydrate over the next 10 minutes, which it's going to do in a pastry bag or zip top plastic bag with the corner cut off. Before piping, we are thoroughly greasing the cavities of our donut pans. And then we're going to fill our cavities about halfway with donut batter. That's way too much. There we go, that's better. Once filled about halfway, these guys are headed for a preheated 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 10 to 12 minutes, until they emerge golden brown and 200 to 210 degrees Fahrenheit at their thickest point. Allow to cool in the pan for 10 minutes before twisting out onto a cooling rack. Now, converting this recipe to chocolate donuts is super easy. Just like our chocolate cookies, we're simply swapping out an amount of flour, in this case 65 grams, for cocoa powder, and that's it. That's all you really need to do. The baking procedure is very much the same, but since they're chocolate, they're a little bit harder to tell when they're done. So I'm making sure that none of my donut cavities are filled any more than halfway, and baking for at least 12 minutes or until we get a good temp at their thickest point. Now, the only other modifier that I'm going to do to the actual donut batter is to make a maple donut, achieved simply by replacing our granulated sugar with 3/4 of a cup or 175 ml of maple syrup and reducing the amount of milk by 75 milliliters to account for the extra moisture. Add the maple syrup to the wet stuff instead of the dry, and you got yourself the mapliest of maple donuts, my personal favorite. Now to introduce some variations on the theme. I'm making more vanilla donuts and subdividing the batter down into 3 parts, each of which I'm going to flavor differently. First up, a tablespoon of poppy seeds and a half teaspoon of lemon oil. Next, simply add rainbow sprinkles and you got yourself some instant birthday cake batter. Lastly, a tablespoon of matcha, which I would recommend you replace flour with in the original recipe because this made it a little too thick, but still works. Pipe and bake as usual, and we got ourselves some fun spins on the original formula, each of which we can whimsically frost accordingly. Now to the leftover maple batter, I'm going to add some frozen blueberries for some very obviously awesome maple blueberry donuts. Imagine making a breakfast sandwich out of that. And for variations on the chocolate, going super simple, starting with some raspberry extract for a chocolate raspberry donut, a tablespoon of espresso powder for a chocolate coffee donut, and a splash of Grand Marnier for a chocolate orange donut. Then once all the donuts are completely cool, it's time to glaze them, each of which we're going to make by combining about a cup of powdered sugar with a small amount of flavorful liquid like maple syrup, skim milk, blueberry juice, cooled coffee, whatever's relevant to the individual donut. So there's our dozen lovely donuts, which we can now arrange in our briefcase for easy transport to and from work. But there's something missing, or rather 2 things. First up, a banana split. I'm going to show you guys a little trick they taught me when I worked at the Chocolate Room in Brooklyn, where for our banana split, we would obviously split a banana, sprinkle the banana with sugar, and then torch it for an instant banana brulee, or banana split Foster, or whatever it is you want to call it. Just make sure it cools completely before peeling and serving. On the left, I have a simple vanilla milkshake with whipped cream, and on the right, I'm assembling our banana split with 3 scoops of vanilla ice cream, or the ice cream of your choice, flanked by our banana brulee, topped with whipped cream, then drizzled with chocolate sauce that I was too lazy to make, and finished with 3 bright red maraschino cherries. And there you have it, folks, Patrick's dessert briefcase. A little more arts and crafts than usual, but I think you'll agree, pretty worth it, at least just to see it in real life. I wouldn't say it's the most practical working lunch, but everybody at the office seemed to like it.
Perfect entry! And toasted almonds, that's unexpected. He stuck it! And just look at that even coating! Curse him, that's good. But perhaps a bit too highbrow for this crowd. Now get up there and show him how the common man prepares his frozen dairy treats! Just look at that concentration! Oh, a little shaky on that entry. But just look at that form!
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week, with the Olympics in full swing, it felt like high time to tackle SpongeBob and Patrick's ice cream entrance into the fry cook games. First up, the reigning champ, SpongeBob, for which we have to make a yellow sponge, Bob. So I'm greasing and parchment papering a 9x13 baking pan, and beginning to separate the yolks and whites of 3 large room temperature eggs. First, the yolks are going in the bowl of a stand mixer along with 75 grams of granulated sugar. These are getting whipped together on high speed for 3 to 4 minutes, until pale and thickened and very nearly at the ribbon stage. In other words, you should be able to draw a figure of 8 that keeps its shape. Scoop that aside, thoroughly clean the bowl, and then it's egg white time, which we're going to beat together with 1/8 teaspoon of cream of tartar. Anytime you're beating egg whites to any stage, this helps keep them stable. Once the whites are frothy, we're going to slowly stream in 100 grams of granulated sugar. Once all the sugar's added, we're continuing to beat for anywhere from 1 to 3 minutes, until the resulting meringue reaches the soft peak stage. In other words, when you pull the whisk out, it should look like this. Next up, we're negotiating the dries, combining 150 grams of sifted cake flour with 3/4 teaspoon kosher salt and 1 teaspoon of baking powder, tiny whisking to combine. Then we're combining 60 grams of room temperature milk with 50 grams of melted unsalted butter, 1 teaspoon vanilla paste, and 1 teaspoon of banana extract. And to get this sponge cake SpongeBob yellow, I'm adding a few teaspoons of yellow food coloring, tiny whisk to combine, and then in a large bowl, we're combining the egg yolk mixture, the dry mixture, and the milk mixture, gently folding to combine just until no dry patches remain. Then we're going to add the beaten egg whites in 2 stages. Start by adding about 1/3 of it, which we're going to gently fold in. It's going to lose most of its volume, but it's going to help the remaining egg whites mix in more easily. So once you got no more remaining white streaks, add the remaining egg whites and very gently fold together, resulting in a light, fluffy, silky batter, which we're going to pour into our prepared pan, gently coax into the corners until even, and then it's headed into a preheated 350-degree Fahrenheit oven for 10 to 14 minutes. While this cools, it's time to make our ice cream, out of none other than SpongeBob's Hearth and Home. I'm peeling and coring a pineapple and placing 350 grams worth in this mysterious cup, along with 90 grams of whole milk, 50 grams of heavy cream, half teaspoon vanilla extract, half teaspoon kosher salt, and 100 grams of agave syrup, or the same amount by weight of your sweetener of choice. Tiny whisk to combine, and then we're pouring it directly over the pineapple. Then this guy's headed into the freezer overnight until rock solid. Now, since SpongeBob's dive is the highbrow act, I thought it warranted using a fancy new toy, that Ninja Creamy that everybody on TikTok can't seem to stop creaming stuff with. As you can see, our pineapple, milk, and sugar mixture is hard as a rock. Into the high-speed death machine it goes, select ice cream setting, and in 4 minutes, a rock-hard block of fruit, dairy, and sugar is shaved and blended by a blade that moves up and down through the cup, producing a silky smooth sorbet that has to be scooped to be believed. Apparently, this is the home cook's answer to the Paco Jet made famous by the menu. And for a giant, pricey blender that doesn't do as much stuff as a blender, I gotta say, pretty cool. So now we have the core elements of our SpongeBob ice cream. Let's put them together. First, I'm carefully slicing the cooled cake into precise rectangles using rulers and maths, trimming it down into little rectangles that are about 1/2 inch smaller than my intended mold. And it has the added benefit of looking exactly like SpongeBob. So now we have to ensconce this banana-flavored cake into pineapple sorbet. So I'm spreading a little sorbet in the bottom, plopping the cake in the center, and packing more sorbet around and on top of it. Rinsing and repeating for all the mold holes. And these guys are headed into the freezer overnight, so they're completely solid before dipping. Once retrieved from the molds, we have to double popsicle stick, just like SpongeBob did, back into the freezer for another hour or 2 to make sure that they're extra cold. And then for dipping, I've melted 1 pound of dark chocolate and mixed it with 3 tablespoons of coconut oil for a homemade magic shell. In goes my roughest looking ice cream bar for practice, which I'm glad that I did because the shell hardened way faster than I thought it would. So when I dipped it in my toasted chopped almonds, I did not get even coverage worthy of the fry cook games. So for once, taking an actual cooking tip from a cartoon, I dove quickly from the chocolate immediately into the almonds, resulting in much nicer, more even coverage. So there's our high concept, highfalutin SpongeBob ice cream. What about the everyman Patrick ice cream? Well, first off, it felt like it'd be crazy not to use starfruit. Granted, the only starfruit I could find was underripe, which apparently causes indigestion, so I'm not going to use too much of it. I'm roughly chopping 3 fruits, placing them in the jar of a food processor, and processing until thoroughly processed. We're just going to be straining out the juice so you can break this down into a pretty fine paste. Now for the pink element, strawberry starfruit has a nice ring to it, so I'm going to puree a pint of strawberries and combine them with 100 grams of starfruit juice. Then to this mixture, I'm adding 340 grams each heavy cream and whole milk, and of course a whopping 200 grams of granulated sugar. I'm also going to add a little bit of pink, a little bit of red food coloring to amp up the Patrickness. So if the Ninja Creamy is highbrow, how does the common man prepare his frozen dairy treats? Well, one way that requires no special equipment is the ice bowl method. Place your ice cream base in a bowl set in a larger bowl full of ice, and whisk constantly for 10 minutes. You can also add water and salt to the ice to better translate the cold. Cover the bowl with a clean towel or plastic wrap and freeze for 30 minutes. Uncover and once again whisk constantly for 10 minutes. Cover it back up, send it back into the freezer for 30 minutes, and repeat this process 2 more times. You know you're done when the ice cream base is thick and slushy and your arm doesn't want to do this no more. Pour into the ice cream container of your choice, cover, and freeze overnight. And the next day, all your effort will be rewarded with some pretty stiff, icy ice cream. This normally turns out smoother and softer with a more dairy-forward base, but all the water and the strawberries and starfruit made it a little icy. That being said, it still scoops and eats just fine. I'm placing my pre-scooped cones back in the freezer because they're gonna have to be upside down for quite a bit. I'm making a chocolate ganache by pouring 300 grams of steaming heavy cream over 500 grams of chopped chocolate, then letting it sit for about 30 seconds before very gently stirring together. But no matter how careful you are, you can still split your ganache. If it looks oily and kind of slides around the pan, looks a little chunky, you can fix this by heating it over a double boiler sometimes, but it's easier to just add a little splash of Grandma SquarePants cough medicine. A touch of alcohol can help re-emulsify the mixture, or it can make it worse. I don't know, ganache is kind of a mystery to me. Either way, once you've got the fat and chocolate ratio right, it's time to dip. Leave it upside down so it gets a little bit of a peak going. Pray that your pre-scoop doesn't come plopping out into the chocolate, and flip it over to try to get that Dairy Queen soft peak. Not as photogenic as Patrick's, but that didn't look fully real to me. So there you have it, SpongeBob and Patrick's ice creams from the Fry Cook games. And since I'm too scared to even eat banana extract, here's guest judge Kendall Beach. She's not here to do the voiceover at the moment, but I will relay her feedback. She thought the pineapple ice cream was fantastic, and the cake, while nice and fluffy, had a very strong fake banana flavor. The Patrick ice cream was too icy, and the starfruit was too tart. So it's no contest, SpongeBob wins this round of the Fry Cook games. And in the end, I had to try a little bit myself. Definitely omit the banana and maybe go with milk chocolate over dark, but I think Patrick put it best when he said,
I got it. Let's get naked.
"No, Patrick, let's save that for when we're selling real estate."